Hello, my name is Lael Goodman, and I'm the Environmental Justice Program Manager with North Brooklyn Neighbors. Today, North Brooklyn Neighbors is speaking with Dr. Peter DeFur. He's the president and owner of the Environmental Stewardship Concepts. Through a grant with the Department of Environmental Conservation, NBN has hired Peter to be a technical advisor to the North Brooklyn community for the cleanup of the state Superfund site known as the former NuHart Plastic Manufacturing Site. So this site has been around since 1887 and has had a number of uses over its lifetime, from office space to storage to shipping and receiving. From 1983 to 2004, NuHart Company used the site to make vinyl siding and sheeting. However, there's groundwater and soil contamination beneath and around the site, and it's contaminated with trichloroethene and phthalates. So the state DEC has laid forth the plan that they have to address the site. It's called the Proposed Remedial Action Plan, also known as the PRAP. Right now there's a public comment period that is open until November 19th, 2018. So we're just going to ask Peter some questions about the plan. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
It's my pleasure to be here.
How does this plan compare to the other options that were presented?
The proposed remedial action plan, or the PRAP, is the most aggressive cleanup option that DEC had to choose from. So I say that based on a technical document that has previously been prepared and released that presents a range of cleanup options using different methods and different techniques. And of those, this plan is the most aggressive one, meaning that it has the most removal of contamination and the most permanent protection against anything that they might not be able to remove because it's under sidewalks and outside the footprint of the old building. So this is really the most aggressive of the ones that was presented. And when we compare it in an absolute fashion to what they possibly could have done, I don't see that there's anything much more that they could have done, short of, digging up all the sidewalks and all of the utilities, and that was not ever going to happen. And I'm not sure that it's a good idea anyway.
Well, that's good to hear. So how does the plan protect the health and safety of the neighborhood?
Well, the plan was crafted to meet several basic criteria. And one of them is protection of human health and the environment. And that means in the short term, during the cleanup, as well as in the long term, when it's all done in 5, 10, and 20 years. So there are two different components to how it protects health and safety of the neighborhood. So during the cleanup, what they're going to do is they're going to remove the building, and then they will take away anything else that's remaining. Eventually, they will remove the concrete slab, and then they will begin to dig down. When they do this, they will cover it with material that prevents dust and debris and all the other sorts of airborne materials and chemicals from a building destruction. They will prevent that from getting into the neighborhood. So once they start removing the concrete and opening up where the contamination is found under the ground, they're going to be doing two things. One of them, for safety, is that they will shore up the walls of the hole they dig. And I think most of us have seen that before, where an excavation has some sort of walls around it to prevent the dirt from falling back in. So that will be a protective measure. That does two things. Number one, it prevents the dirt from falling back in, but it also prevents any residual remaining contamination that's on the outside there from coming back in the hole. So that digging will be covered by a tent, and not just any old tent. It's a tent that's designed to capture any vapors and emissions that are coming out of that hole. So it's fairly airtight, and it will have a vacuum air pump on it with a filter. And these systems are used around the country not commonly, because we usually don't have the sort of situation where we need it. But it might be used if you have a highly contaminated area that's going to have a lot of vapors coming up, or if you have very, very dangerous materials that you can't afford to have but the slightest amount in the open air. So those are some of the really basic and important measures. In the long term, they've got another feature in there which will be very protective, and that is they're going to put barriers into the ground to prevent any contamination from moving around and getting any further away than where it is. Because they will be trying to and putting in special mechanisms to extract any of the phthalates, especially, that remain deep underground. So they're 15 feet underground and deeper. So that's the phthalates, and that's over on one corner. On the other corner, diagonally opposite, over by Clay Street, there are vapors that are coming out of the ground, and that's TCE. TCE is a solvent used in cleanings, used in some industrial purposes to dissolve things and create various specialties. So they spilled some over there, and the vapors are leaking upward into the air. And so they're going to put in a system of piping to extract those vapors. And in order to make sure that the vapors come up and move to where the piping can suck those out as well, they will put pipes in deeper, and they will push air underneath so that the air coming up will push the TCE vapors up to where they're going to be extracted by the pipes. And again, those pipes will suck them out, they'll put them through a filter, and then they'll have that contained, that contamination contained. So they're going to use that vapor extraction method in two different ways. One of them with the tent that will be covering the site, and the other one with the vapor extraction. So those are well-known measures. It's not experimental technique. It's not experimental equipment.
Great, thanks. So how long is this cleanup likely to last?
The initial cleanup will be the footprint of the old building. The building that's still there and it's empty, it's not being used. And they want to start, the owners want to start on that activity at that building site shortly after the beginning of the year. So there are a number of steps that have to go through.
Right at the beginning of 2019 then?
Right at the beginning of 2019, during January of 19, that's what they want to do. And that's a good idea because they have a lot of steps to take. They have to dismantle the building, they have to demolish the building. They have to make sure they do that safely. So it's going to take some time. You can't just come in there with a piece of big heavy equipment and knock it down and expect everything's going to be fine. No, they have to be careful about doing it. So part of it may in fact be dismantled piece by piece.
Mm-hmm.
They already have to remove all of the equipment from inside, the tanks and the pipes from inside the building under a different permit. And they have to do that to make sure that it's handled safely and it's disposed of properly. So that is going to take some time to do. And I imagine, based on how long it takes to demolish a building, to take up the concrete beneath, to construct this tent, that we're going to be looking at it. We're going to be looking at a cleanup that lasts for probably 2 years, maybe more.
Okay.
Because you've got to do things carefully there. There's not an opportunity to go back and redo it. So you have to do it right the first time. And it's a bit of a crowded space. It's surrounded on 3 sides by streets. It's surrounded on 2 sides by housing, by residential properties. And then there's that park on the 3rd side. And the 4th side is, of course, the building that is not contaminated. It's not part of the cleanup site. So that building actually has to come down too. And that's an independent action.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that comes down first, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
So it's all according to a plan. And that plan has to be prepared by the owners and their contractors, their engineers, and it will be submitted to the Department of Environmental Conservation, to DEC, and they have to approve that plan. So they also, the department, has to look at this plan with an eye to protecting public health and public safety, to make sure that that they've thought of everything and that they've got somebody there watching over it.
So is that the next step in the process?
The next formal step after the one we're in now, we're in the Proposed Remedial Action Plan. DEC must finalize that into a record of decision. The record of decision is a formal document. Anybody can go type in the words record of decision into a search engine online, and you will come up with a lot of different options. You'll find the record of decision for cleaning up the Hudson River, the one for cleaning up Gowanus Canal. So those are on the record. And that's the next formal step. And after that, then we go into the work plan. So we design the work, and then we conduct the work. And part of that involves an environmental health and safety plan, and some public availability of those documents.
Great. Are there any elements that you see in the proposed remedial action plan that you think need greater clarification or more attention?
There are a couple of things that that are going to have to be spelled out in detail in the design of the work and the implementation of the work, and we just want to make sure that those are carried out. So one of them would be to make sure that there's somebody there to inspect. Somebody needs to make sure that they are following the correct procedures. There are two things. One of them that was brought up by a citizen is that the building, as it sits there now, because it's in part because it's vacant, in part because of where it's located, has been a place for songbirds to nest in the spring. And so the remedial action plan is silent on that. And they can easily take steps to make sure that those birds either aren't nesting there or that they get the work done outside the nesting period. So that's an easy fix. And then another one is to make sure that the traffic will be routed in a way that has the least impact on the neighborhood. And the sort of detail of how they're going to route the traffic would necessarily be in one of the later plans, one of the later documents, but it's a good point to highlight here. So that's an important point. So there's a level of detail that the agency may not feel that it's necessary to put in the document at this particular time, but it doesn't give us any level of comfort. And that is when they start to dig beneath where the building is now, we know that they're going to remove the concrete slab, and we know that they're going to find storage tanks, maybe some other equipment. They will find contamination, and they will dig and remove that. How far down will they dig? So the remedial action plan, the PRAP, indicates that they will dig according to what the state regulations are. Well, that's a pretty truncated and shortened version of we're going to dig until we find clean dirt, or we're going to dig until the concentration of the contaminants is below the amount that's set by the state cleanup standards. So that's a little vague in the PRAP, and I know the citizens want to know that answer. So that's not terribly clear. And then there's another similar sort of detail that I have questions about, and that is about the barrier that they're going to place in the ground to prevent contamination from moving any further. We want to, and that barrier is going to have to be deep in the ground. We want to make sure that barrier is going to last for the lifetime of the contamination and longer. It can't be a barrier that might break down or fall apart.
Yeah, sounds important. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Peter. North Brooklyn Neighbors is going to be having 2 comment-a-thons where you can talk to Peter about any questions you may have, or just come to submit your comments. Those are going to be on November 13th. And I'm going to put some details right after the video in a slide. So thanks for watching.